film noir 1990-2010. It's a retrospective, and the festival has decided to program this year. It's an initiative we thought was being very interesting because it allowed us to give us an overview of that genre that we like very much, which is noir, the noir genre, and what we've seen over the last 20 years. We talk about the classic titles of these types of, we forget that it's a genre which is still alive, and it continues to offer very interesting possibilities, and we wanted to see this overview of discovering films that we thought quite noticeable and quite notable. Quite simply, I want to introduce the invited guests. We have two invited guests, luxury guests. I'll very briefly talk about the cycle of the book and allow them to talk. We're very fortunate to have two directors who, and this was clearly explained in the inauguration gala, that represents two generations, shall we say, or two different contributions of different eras to the genre, the noir genre. On my right, Amy Keenan-Mann, who you consider one the just arrived sort of director to the American noir genre, because we have, as a premiere of her film, Texas Killing Fields, which is her opera prima as a director. This is a recent contribution to the noir genre. It's great for the cycle. We're talking about 1990-2010, but this is a 2011, but it's just been made, and we thought it was great to have in the inauguration of the cycle. It demonstrates quite clearly something which is quite alive, and it continues to exist. She also is the daughter of Michael Mann, who you know very much, and all of us, I'm convinced, we admire, and is represented in the cycle and has given very classic titles to the genre. And also we have, further on my right, the great honor of having with us Walter Hill, who for most of us is a man who's elementary in this type of genre. We've all enjoyed his films, and I was talking to him before that since I was a teenager I've always loved his films, and he was here, I remember, in 1981, was it? Correct? With his film 1981 with Southern Comfort, one of his great films at that stage, and it's great. The idea to come back to San Sebastian 30 years later, it's been great for him. He's enjoying himself, and he's got a film in the cycle, Last Man Standing, which is another film which we believe to be indispensable in this retrospective. So therefore I want to thank him for both of them for being here, to have the detail to come all the way here to back us up and to a certain extent to accompany this cycle. Quite briefly, I would like to explain that the cycle, as is usual in San Sebastian, is accompanied with a publication coordinated by Mr. Santamarina here on the right and myself, and it's a cycle and which is a publication collaborated with the Valencian Filmothèque. We've got Jose Antonio and Angel Mancha, who are representatives of the Filmothèque, and we want to thank them very much for collaborating and participating with us in this project. And they've also backed it up, and they liked it very much. And also we have the support of the Basque Filmothèque as well, and TCM as the sponsor of the cycle. I think that I want to thank the authors. I think it's a book which is also very interesting because it's been made on both sides of the Atlantic. We've had Spanish authors and some old friends of the festival, as well as authors from the US, because we believed that it was very important to have the point of view of the country where this genre, noir genre, emerged. So therefore, apart from collaborators, King Casa, Ricardo Gallon, Cide de Fed, who are regular in the festival, and I thank them very much for collaborating. We've also had the collaboration of Alice Silver James, and who are probably the main specialists in noir cinema that we have, that exists today. And there are many publications on this genre, and we believed it was very important for them to give their vision. Or Cruz Fujiwara and Dean Lawrence, who are great specialists here. So therefore we're very happy to have them participate in the whole project. And I prefer almost that Amy, as well as Walter, can talk about their respective experiences with noir film and how they see it, whether it's a genre, and it's always attracted them because otherwise you wouldn't be doing these films. Give us your vision, what you would believe of the genre and how you see whether it's evolved over the time or whether it can continue to offer an attraction to the general audience. What do you think? Each of you answer as you deem pertinent. You go first, because you're the lady. Go on.
The noir genre, I think, so if noir is crime, I think for some reason crime has always been a very interesting genre to use because I feel it can be used almost metaphorically to talk about other issues that we may want to talk about. I think that's been certainly the case after World War II when sorry. Certainly the case after World War II when I was being used to talk about what was, in retrospect, obviously, in the United States and the post-traumatic stress syndromes that an entire generation of men, to some extent women, are having. And I think that continues on. To use the language so clear in crime, good guy, bad guy, there's something, there's an issue we need to resolve, how can we resolve it? And then on top of that, filmmakers tend to use that as a platform to talk about more subtle and nuanced emotional states of being.
I agree. Noir, I think, is very difficult to talk about because it's one of those categories we all think we know what it is when we see it, but at the same time, the people that write about it can never quite agree what it exactly is. And I think our definitions have become much looser. To me, probably the most classic noir film would be Turner's Out of the Past. It meets, it seems to me, every definition of the noir. I noticed in the book they talk about, I was going through it a little bit today in the room, they talk about my association with Sam Peckinpah and The Getaway. It is noirish in a sense, but it doesn't meet the definition of the tragic ending where the protagonist coming to a poor ending. So it's evolving. It's a style. It's a kind of photography. It's a sensibility about life. It's a mode of storytelling, and it has adapted. I think David's absolutely right. The crime story is kind of inseparable from the noir tradition.
Creo que hay otra pregunta allí, sí. Question back there, I think. Question in the back there, okay. I would like to ask both of you, on the one hand, the issue that the noir genre, how the role of women, how has it evolved? Because in classic cinema, women had a more specific role to play, but now with how it's evolved, and in general, whether you consider that it currently the noir cinema can tell stories that it couldn't tell in the past, or vice versa. In the past, it could tell everything and linked with the cliches of the genre. How do you think that's evolved at the end of the day?
Well, traditionally, in the original noirs, the role of the woman was usually the temptress siren that brought the male protagonist to his tragic fate. I don't think you're going to get very far with that approach anymore. As a matter of fact, you'll get run out of town. So I just think the definition of noir is so much looser now that it probably is amorphous to the extent that we can't define. The question seems to me to be better, how has the role of women changed in the iconography of movies over the years? And It has within noir, it has within westerns, and it has within comedies. They don't make comedies like Doris Day comedies anymore either. So.
Yes. What do you think?
Oh, I think Walter's absolutely right. I think that you'd have to, the relationship, the role of women in noir's inception was, as Walter said, it was so specific. Again, I think possibly as a way for America after the war to understand the changing relationships between men and women, and women during the war had so much economic autonomy and logistical autonomy, and the GIs returned home. There was much conflict because there was tension, domestic tension. How were women going to receive back into the domestic sphere when they were just being so decidedly not in the domestic sphere during World War II? We're talking about America specifically. And I think, so within the context of the noir genre that was being played out, so you have women as temptress, femme fatale, icon of evil, and we also had several of these women as victim, innocent, and there was that interesting dichotomy. As I just said, I don't know what you could do about these days. I just don't think it would be society. I don't know that people would be able to identify with that. So I think you have various, perhaps more nuanced portrayals of women in the crime genre.
I'd like to ask, the context is the issue. Whether you consider that, for example, September 11, 2001, and 2001, the crash in the stock exchange and the depression as a consequences modified or had an effect upon the development of noir films in the U.S. as well as in the crack in 1929 and then the Great Depression, whether that has had any effect upon noir films, that is September 11 and the crack in 2008, which brought about a certain depression that we're still suffering.
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, I think real catastrophes and economic downturns usually have the effect of altering movies that are attempting a kind of social realism. Noir is at its very heart, I think, poetic, and so I think is less affected by these moments of terrible turmoil. I mean, you can certainly make a strong case that the noir, the tragedy of the noir tradition, and the tragic elements of it, was a counterweight to American optimism after the victory of the Second World War. So, I guess if you carry that thesis to its extension, the opposite effects tend to play out in narrative structures in the cinema.
And I think you'd have to, I don't know that you could call in the crash in 1929. I mean, certainly the United States, as is the rest of the world, is suffering in the midst of a global financial crisis. But I think that the filmic results of that in 1929 is actually, interestingly, quite antithetical to the filmic result of World War II. You had movies of, Hawks and Sturges which have a very different kind of sensibility and approach to the conflicts that we see around us every day. I do think that it would be interesting to watch the genre, noir and also crime, because I think that it's possible that America is only just now coming to terms with the September 11th and subsequent economic crises. Coming to terms with it in a creative, and those events, manifestations in America's creativity and songs and music and literature and film. I think we're just now beginning to see, I think, the beginning of us as a country doing with how we feel about what happened.
Si hay alguna pregunta más, si no.
Further questions, otherwise I would like to ask the following. Walter, as well as Amy, could you talk about the films in the retrospective? Amy, as I said before, she just presented in the Venice Film Festival, in the official section. Texas Skinnyfield was premiered there, it seems, which is also presented here, which was presented here yesterday, and Walter Hill is going to present this afternoon the film that's included in our retrospective, Last Man Standing. So therefore, I would like you, for both of you, to talk about your respective films. Could you talk a bit more about how you worked upon the noir genre in both of the films that you directed?
Well, my film was made about 15 years ago. It was the closing film at the Venice Film Festival that year. The film was an adaptation of one of Mr. Kurosawa's most famous films in the West, Yojimbo. I did the film with great trepidation and only with the encouragement of Mr. Kurosawa. My approach was to go back to there were a lot of stories and comments that Kurosawa had been influenced by Dashiell Hammett's Red Harvest. So I reread Red Harvest, and then I thought maybe the story could be turned into a gangster film set in a western town. And then I just kind of played it out there. I don't think I ever thought 10 seconds about working within the noir tradition. I think that was something that maybe crept in by osmosis, I guess you would say. I just thought about the narrative and what the characters would do within that narrative. Usually I approach it starting with the character and work it the other way around. But that one I was very conscious of. I was conscious of the weight of the forebear, Mr. Kurosawa's film. So that prescribed some of the narrative considerations and kind of forced me into thinking about that first. And again, I think that's unusual for me.
For Texas Skinnyfields, the story of Texas Skinnyfields is unfortunately inspired by true events. There's a place called Texas City, Texas, and outside of Texas City, there's been just under 60 bodies discovered since 1969. Half of those crimes, or less than half of them, are currently unsolved. Various types of victims, various killers. The research that accompanied the screenplay was incredibly compelling, and the more that delved into the research, the more compelling it became. Because unfortunately these events that the film is based on are true, it made a tough story, a brilliant script by Don Farrell, made a tough story even tougher because you couldn't dismiss it as just being a piece of narrative. So my thinking was, the objective really was to make as many people aware as possible of even just a little bit of the fact of this phenomena of crime that had occurred outside of the city. And that the way to do that was perhaps, the way to approach the genre, the crime genre, was to be as sort of visually and sonically seductive as possible, to be evocative in the approach. There are some elements of the story that could be, if you could make the choice as the filmmaker, to be very graphic. But I felt like that might be repulsive, might be difficult to take, and And I wanted the audience to, hopefully, if we were sort of modest and clever and smart about it, to be drawn into this world, so that we could tell them the story. So that was by design the approach of the genre, was to be as non-literal visually as possible.
I'm not too sure if there are any further questions. Further questions? Yes? Yes, good afternoon. Mr. Hill, you're saying that there's a happy ending to the film that you say wouldn't be a noir genre film. Did you think about using the last chapter of the novel, which is quite bitter, and you left it to one side? I think he's talking about the film you told me about before about Mr. Corazon. I'm not too sure. There's a last chapter of the book that you haven't included, which is quite bitter, which you should have included. I'm not too sure what film.
I don't say that I adapted the book. I didn't use any of the book. I was influenced by the idea that Mr. Kurosawa's story was based upon the book that Hammett had written. I don't even know. Supposedly, this was not something that you talked to Mr. Kurosawa about. So, how much he was directly influenced by this book, I could not tell you. But my own adaptation, I did not do a remake. I did an adaptation, and I wanted to do a gangster film in a small town in the West. I don't think that my film has exactly what I would call a happy ending. It is true that the very wicked have been dealt a severe punishment, but the very nature of the protagonist in my film, I don't think he exactly leaves town a wildly happy man.
Sorry, I wasn't asking about Red Harvest. I was talking about Getaway, the film. I was talking about Getaway. That's the film. Sorry, my mistake as an interpreter. Sorry, we didn't catch that. Okay. Sorry.
Well, the Thompson book has an ending which down in Mexico, with the town composed of retired criminals that are in this kind of la-la land of where they buy their freedom down there. There was a precondition when I got that job that they were not going to do that. That the only real debate was whether or not the gunfight at the border was going to end in the death of the McQueen character, or they were going to get away to Mexico. And so that was off the table before I was even part of the project.
And it's an ending. I'm not too sure if Mr. Hill knows that the Franco censorship modified in Spain, and at the end, when it seemed they were freed and they made it to Mexico, on-off, they were arrested later on. But this is something that's done. I'm not too sure whether he knows that. Could he put the headphones on, please? Amy, could you tell him? Walter? Yes, repeat that. No.
Modified this ending.
Is it good?
Yes, a voiceover tell to the people that these guys were arrested after that.
Oh. Well, then they didn't get away in Spain.
They should change the title on this one.
I'm not too sure whether there are any further questions. We've got to finish because Mr. Hill has to present Last Man Standing in in the film theatre. Without any further questions, if there are no further questions, I would like to address the following. And for both of you to answer, because it's something which is recurrent in the book. Many authors that have collaborated continue to talk about this. To what extent is it possible to make noir genre without going back to the tradition that exists in the genre? There are many movies that are remakes, or there's always the shadow of the genre film, noir genre that's made in the past. Have you felt this weight of tradition, or have you tried to free yourself from the tradition to do something completely different? I remember one of the most favorite films by Walter Hill, and I believe it's one of the best detective films or criminal films in American film, which is Driver. It's a film that at that time contributed a very new vision to the genre. Could both of you say whether you felt that burden or tempted of imitating previous films, or have you freed yourself from that in the case of Amy because you have your influence at home, because your father has given some of the best criminal films of the last few years, so therefore, have you been able to free yourself from that burden of the past, of the genre, of the noir genre, or how did you go about this, or what's the story there, end of the day?
Well, I don't think we're ever free of either the burden or the gifts of the past. I mean, we are all connected. Amy's father and I are very good friends. I've known Amy since she was a small girl. So it's kind of wonderful to be sitting here next to her as a gifted filmmaker. We're all connected, we all hold hands, we all sit on each other's shoulders as filmmakers, as storytellers. And I don't think you think consciously about it, but your own personality, if you happen to be lucky enough to have one as a storyteller, your own personality does come through in what you're attracted to and the way you tell the story. But influence is something that's forever with us. When I was early in my directing career, those many years ago, people thought that I was very influenced. They now usually write, I noticed, that about the influence of Howard Hawks has had on me. I appreciate that, and I plead guilty. But early in my career, they always said Peckinpah had a very great influence. I mean, I knew him and worked with him. Peckinpah was always perceived to be massively influenced by Kurosawa. Kurosawa was always perceived correctly to be massively influenced by John Ford. You cannot look at John Ford's movies without seeing his debt to Griffith. And you can't see Griffith's films without seeing his debt to Dickens. So I don't know where it ends. I guess it all ends back at Homer. And we're all connected. So I just think we're all part of all the films we've ever seen. And then we work within that. And we go on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can agree more. I don't know why we want to free ourselves from the past. When the past is as rich as it is, with lessons to be learned, and those who forged that path. I think there's a huge advantage in looking back. And then ultimately, when you make the series of decisions that you make when you make a film, or when you write a novel, when you write a song, or anything that you do creatively, ultimately, you're just trying to tell that story from the perspective that you have as a person walking through the world. And so that perspective will then be influenced by the fact of whether you're a man or a female, or who your parents are, or what economic status you are, or how you grew up, and where you grew up, and all those things in ways that I think are unmanageable and probably not really worth investigating too deeply. That influence, I think, all the decisions about where you put the shot and how you design that wardrobe and what music you choose. But all of that rests on the benefits of of looking at the past and learning everything you can from it. Absolutely.
Well, again, connected. Is Amy influenced by her father? Of course. I'm influenced by my father. He just didn't happen to be a filmmaker. That's life. You know, that's the way we are.
Well, okay. If there are no further questions, we've got to finish because we want to invite you all to see Last Man Standing, presented by Walter Hill, and who's never seen it, it's a great film, by the way. And obviously, I want to thank both of them, Walter Hill and Amy Kennerman, for being here today and coming all the way to San Sebastian and to present their films. Thank you very much to both of you. Thank you.